And so finally I got them all straightened out. It's about noontime. And at that point, I kept jumping him. He kind of lost interest in trying to keep track of me. And so he wasn't going too far. He'd go 200-300 yards, bed back down. And so I jumped him 3 times total. And then the last time,
Welcome back to another episode of Northwoods Whitetails. I'm sitting here in the Green Mountain State with a few buck killers. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Garret, Laperle.
Devin, Messier.
Connor Shalom.
All right. How you guys doing?
Good.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Good.
Had a long week.
yeah, same here. The cool weather's getting me excited though.
Oh,
I don't know
for
about
sure.
you guys.
Yeah. Every morning it wakes up and it's about 45 degrees. It's getting closer and closer, that's for sure.
Yes, it is. Yeah. That cold air in the morning really, it like turns something on in my mind where it's like, oof, it's getting close. Do you guys want to tell a little bit about yourselves and what you guys do for work and your background?
Yeah, I'm been born and raised in Vermont, central Vermont. I weld pipe for work. And we work pretty much just in New England. And it works out pretty good to go deer hunting because we end about November 1st, first week of November. And then I can take most of deer hunting off and do what I enjoy.
No, what kind of pipe do you like? Water pipes? Or?
So the company I subcontract to, we weld snowmaking pipe. So it's
okay.
water and air for all their snow systems. And we work at all the ski areas pretty much. And
Gotcha.
You've been all over New England, haven't you?
Yep. This year I've worked Vermont, Massachusetts, New York, and I'm going to be in New Hampshire probably in a couple of weeks. Everywhere but Maine.
Do a little deer scouting along the way.
Yeah. A lot of them ski areas, I guess you can't hunt, but boy, we see a pile of deer, and they're just about tame all the time.
That's
And
cool.
all the videos you send me all the time, it seems like you can just about walk right up to
Oh,
them
for
just
sure.
about.
Yeah, they're not bashful.
And what do you do for work?
I own my own concrete business, residential, putting concrete foundations, slabs, sidewalks, all sorts of stuff like that.
Right. So this is your busy time of year, like we were
Yeah.
kind of saying before.
Yeah, I mean, it's stupid this time of year. Don't have really much time to think about anything, but it's getting to the wind down season to where I can start thinking about deer hunting a little bit more and get excited about it at least.
Right,
Yep.
know what's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody wants to get everything buttoned up for the
Yeah.
fall. Oh
Yeah.
man,
Scramble mode.
I know. I see it with plumbing. Like everybody's like they want to be in by Thanksgiving,
Right, no,
you know?
for sure.
or- yeah. So, how long have you guys been deer hunting?
Been deer hunting since 2007. Started when I was 10. My dad got me into it, and a bunch of his buddies would all go up to northern New Hampshire. And there's about a group of 3 or 4 of them every year. Man, them guys were shooting big bucks. They were coming home. If they weren't 200 pounds, boy, they were close. And that really got the itch to get the big woods.
Yep, that's cool.
Mhm.
And what about you?
I first year I went out, I shot my first doe when I was 8 over in New Hampshire for youth season. Ever since then, really got going after it and never stopped.
Yep, that's cool. So you guys have been doing it your whole lives then.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Would you guys primarily like call yourselves trackers or just opportunists, or like how do you guys like to hunt?
So I'd say when I first started hunting, it was opportunist. But now, like when you guys come out with that first podcast there's been a bunch of them. But listening to the podcast over the last couple of years, it's really got me into the hunting the bigger woods and tracking. Last year, went down to Massachusetts, and boy, got one finally. I got does and stuff tracking before in Vermont, but finally got a decent buck doing it, and boy, it lit a fire.
It clicked. I'd say you did pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got 3 good ones last year.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell your first tracking buck story
Yeah.
in Massachusetts?
The first one, actually, I thought that I had tracked that same buck the whole time, and it ended up being a satellite deer. But I had hunted Massachusetts the week before, and we had no snow. Took can't hunt on Sundays. So I come home, went back down Monday, and they had about 8 inches of fresh snow. It was just stopping snowing there when I was getting over the border. So I got to where I wanted to go hunting, the road I had been hunting, I guess I should say. And there's about 4 sets of deer tracks crossing the road. And there were a lick of snow in them, and I knew they were fresh. So I got out and looked at them, and one of those 4 tracks cut off by itself. And I said, well, that's probably the one I'm going to chase and go after. So I parked my truck and go after him. I didn't go 200 yards. I was probably within sight of the truck, not thinking he was going to bed down so fast, and I jumped him. So I give him some time, half hour, 45 minutes, start tracking him again. And we go up over this knoll, and he started feeding. So I slowed down. Me and Devin, a bunch of our buddies, got a group chat on Snapchat. So I took a picture of him, and I says, any minute, I'm going to be back on him. Put my phone back in my pocket, and I looked up, and the direction his tracks were going, there was a deer running right at me. So I shot, and I got him. Well, come to find out, that was a different buck, and the one I ended up shooting was the guy had jumped him probably a little over a mile, probably a mile and a half, because it took him. I met up with that guy like 2 hours later and found out what had happened.
Yep.
But
so you don't know like what the one you were tracking was?
I do not. So I met up with that guy. He followed my backtrack down, and I got telling the story, and I told him, I picked the deer's track up. And he's like, no, you didn't. And I was like, what? Thinking he was being kind of a dink to me. And he's like, I jumped that buck. He said, I followed his tracks right to your gut pile. And I was like, well, I says, that other set of tracks, I says, was definitely a buck. I said, I just jumped him. And so he ended up going back and tracking that one. But so that, I don't know, that was kind of a letdown because I was pretty hyped up, thinking that I had tracked one. So after that one, the second one, boy, I was on a mission. After I got that second one, I backtracked, made sure that was definitely the same one.
So you got the first one, and then did you come back home?
I did.
You came back home with a deer.
Yep.
You got them cut up.
And the day, so I got that first one. It was December 12th, and Devin and his girlfriend were just coming back from Illinois, and me and Devin go hunting pretty much everywhere together. And so we had rented an Airbnb for the 13th for the rest of the season. So I come back, they come over, checked out the deer, we loaded up the trucks, and the next morning we went back. And I hunted with him for, I don't know, week and a half.
Yeah, it was all of that first week we hunted together.
Yeah.
We ended up jumping to what we thought was that buck that you ended up shooting.
Yeah.
That was the first week of muzzleloader.
I ended up shooting him. Or shooting at him, at least.
Yeah.
The second one or the first one?
The second one.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
So you guys were in a good pocket of deer.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We were covered up in them. But a lot of them we were tracking, we were finding out they were either already shed bucks or does.
Yeah. Common thing.
They shed early last year. So, so were you guys in a swamp? You said a swamp earlier.
Yeah.
So I think that's where a lot of the deer were last year with with no feed in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of all they had.
Yeah.
A lot of moss last year, for sure.
A lot of moss and a lot of the green stuff in the swamp. And I mean, I think that's a big learning lesson for, me at least, because I don't think I've ever seen a year with that little of mass crop in the years that I've been hunting. But I'm sure it happens every so often, and the next time it does, I know where to go. And that's down in the swamp, because that's everybody that I've talked to that was successful last year. It was in a swamp of some sorts.
Yeah, it seemed like we got a pile of snow, and it seemed like the does were headed for better ground, and the bucks were staying put. They didn't want to do anything but stay where they were at and feed. And they found them areas with the feed, and they didn't want to leave them.
It's almost like the calendar was ahead a couple months with the no feed.
Yeah,
it's almost like the deer are acting like how they would usually act in January or February. From what I've heard, because like the stories you were telling earlier about tracking last year, and the bucks just weren't going very far.
No.
So you want to tell the second buck?
Yeah. So that second one, me and Devin were hunting together for that next week, and we finally decided to split up. We just weren't on the bucks, and figured if we split up and got some better intel, we'd have a better chance of getting another one. So Devin did some research on Onyx, found this spot that looked good. So I drove around and dropped him off, and I went to a different spot that day. and met up with him that night. And he said, man, he said, we got to go there tomorrow. He said, there's a pile of deer in there. And he says, they're just a lot of feed. And he said, they don't seem to be wanting to leave. So the next day I did the same thing, went around, dropped him off. I left actually from the place we were staying, walked out the back door. It butted up to a bunch of state land. And it was early in the morning. I jumped a deer walking in, wasn't quite sure what it was. And anyways, kept to the plan, went into that swamp, and I jumped this buck. Didn't know it was, I knew it was a buck because I went over and I smelled his bed and stuff, and it just smelled like a buck. But I didn't know it still had horns. So I'm going into this not knowing, knowing these bucks are shedding their horns, not knowing he still had horns. So I tracked him, and he got onto a group of deer that must have been the tracks were a day or two old, but he was walking in their tracks. So it was really hard to decide, which one was his and which one wasn't. And so finally I got him all straightened out. It's about noontime. And at that point, I kept jumping him. He kind of lost interest in trying to keep track of me. And so he wasn't going too far. He'd go 200-300 yards, bed back down. And so I jumped him 3 times total. And then the last time, this buck, he kind of got into this real thick stuff. And I'm beat feeting on him, trying to gain some ground, not thinking he was going to lay down so quick. And there was a fallen down tree, and he walked up to that fallen down tree, and it looked like he wanted to jump over it, but he backed up and walked around it. And me not thinking, I just shot around that fallen down tree. Well, when I looked up, he's standing there at 40 yards looking at me. And I could see he had, I looked like a spike horn to me, but it was his brow tine, and I couldn't see that he had a rack. And when he turned to run, I could see his rack, and I got lucky, and I touched one off, and I got him. So that all worked out. But yeah.
How far apart from the first year to the second one were you?
I was probably mile and a half from.
No shit.
Yeah,
Not
where they
far
both.
at all.
Yeah,
Not very far.
No.
Same chunk of woods.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, one was on one side of this old road, so down where we are in Mass, they got a bunch of them 4th class roads kind of deal like we got up here that the locals and the Vermonters all drive out, and think nothing of it. And so pretty much that was all that was separating that chunk of woods. And when I was driving in that first week down there, of course, I was getting there half hour before daylight, 15 minutes probably before daylight. And I was always seeing deer cross right there. Didn't really think too much of it. It's just trying to figure out where they were going from there. But it just seemed to be a good transition spot for him.
That's where you cut his track.
Yep.
No kidding. They were both very nice deer.
Mm-hmm.
What did they weigh?
So the first one weighed 132. And the second one was 124. Neither one of them had an ounce of fat on them.
Wow, light deer.
Yeah.
Now, both have beautiful racks. People listening can't see them, obviously, but did you score either of them?
I did not.
They're both like probably around the 110, the 115 mark. Yeah.
Yeah, that second one, he probably doesn't score quite up so well. He's not. Yeah. He's wide, but he's not super tall.
Missing a brow, but that other that's a beauty.
Yeah.
Well, I have a feeling you're going to be headed back to Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah. I got the itch now.
Yeah. Oh, it's fun down there late season, especially if they still have their antlers.
Oh, for sure.
Finally get some a little bit of snow down there, too. It's
a
lot of fun.
Yeah. And I think a lot of guys are done.
Yeah.
A lot of guys are done hunting.
Yeah.
Now, Devin, I heard you go out of state a lot. You go out Midwest and do a lot of bow hunting.
Yep. Go out to usually Illinois and Indiana and hunt it quite a bit. And go out there for usually the first couple weeks in November, hit the prime rut, and usually do pretty well out there. Last year I didn't do too good. I only shot a small 10, but you gotta take what you can get. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny to hear that small 10 as a Vermonter. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
Now, how do you go about hunting out there? Do you stay in your truck? Do you camp? Do you get a room?
We have a camp full of guys out there. There's 16 of us that go out every year, and it's same group.
All Vermonters?
Yep. There's a couple guys from New Hampshire, but
cool.
Pretty much all Vermonters. Yeah.
You guys hammer them pretty good out there?
Yeah, we usually do pretty well. Most of the time, everybody fills their tag for the most part. Whether it's a small 6 or a 150-inch 10, you never know what you're going to get.
Right.
And what are you guys setting up in? Like travel corridors or what?
Yeah, I mean, mostly you just hitting their travel spots where they're going from the does are going from their feed to bedding areas, and that usually does pretty well for you.
You tend to see a few good ones every now and then.
Absolutely, for sure. Yep.
It's a whole different world, isn't it?
Oh, it's completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. I went down to Ohio quite a bit when I was younger, and it was a lot of fun just seeing the, like, the deer behavior, because it's like that's the stuff you don't see in the Northeast much. You just, because the numbers aren't as great. So you just don't see that kind of behavior.
It's
I
happening,
guess.
you just don't see it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's a different atmosphere out there, that's for sure. You see it quite a bit more. But
Right.
you do a lot of stand sitting out there. It's not hunting around here to where you can actually venture out and learn what the deer are actually doing instead of sitting in your stand waiting for them to come by.
Right. Now, you got a big buck in Vermont. What year was that?
2019.
2009. You want to tell that story? That was a beauty. What did that one score?
153.
Oh, yeah.
That was like
Yeah.
number one, wasn't it?
No, that was the year that Gene shot his
Okay.
buck that year. So I think I ended up getting knocked down to third. Somebody else beat me by an inch or so. But
Either
Yeah.
way.
yeah,
Giant buck.
That was a giant.
I was tickled pink to shoot that thing, that's for sure.
That
That
was
was just a shit lucky type deal, that's for sure. Just
Really?
looked at this piece of woods, had been wanting to go in there for years, and it was Thanksgiving Day, and I said, you know what, today's the day we're gonna try it out, and walked up through there. It was wicked windy out and had snowed, and it was really crunchy, and I said, well, the wind's in my favor, I'm just gonna head out, and started walking out this logging road, and I don't know, probably about an hour goes by, and all of a sudden I run into a bunch of fresh hookins. I was like, well, there's bucks in here somewhere.
Yeah.
No sooner I said that, I look up, and there's a buck looking at me, and all of a sudden he just beds right down. I'm watching him. He's behind a tree, can't get a shot off at him, and a couple times he turns around and licks himself, and I said, well, he's legal. I said, as soon as he stands up, I'm going to give him one. And waiting there for a while, probably about, I don't know, felt like forever, and probably only was about 10 minutes. I happened to be looking around and look up the ridge, and lo and behold, he's standing up there looking down at me, trying to figure out what I'm doing, getting closer to this other deer. And
Wow.
A
So it
different
wasn't the buck.
no, it was a completely different one. The one that I was looking at was pretty sure it was a 6-pointer, nice buck anyway. But he was just sitting there trying to figure out what I was, and he was only about 80 yards up the ridge, and I had to do a double take on him, look back up at him. I said, yeah, you're legal. Pow! And watch him run up through. I thought sure as hell that I missed, and I tried getting another one at him and missed that time. And there was a little tiny bit of snow on the ground, tracked him out, and couldn't find a bit of blood anywhere. And I said, well, I think this is where he went, and finally found some blood, and about another 100 yards he expired.
Wow.
Yeah, I was pretty pumped when I walked up to him. I was like, woof. I was like, you have a lot more than I thought you had on you.
Did you know about the deer?
No, not at all. They just, like I said, shit lucky, just walked into the woods. And
Did people come out of the woodwork that knew about him or pictures of him?
there was only one guy that I knew had pictures of him,
No
and
kidding.
he actually, the night I'd shot him, I actually ended up hanging him up here at Garrets, and he wanted to come see him because he had a bunch of pictures of him there in bow season.
Really?
But he could never catch up to him, and he said all of a sudden he just vanished.
Yeah.
He said never see him again, moved to a different chunk of woods.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a special deer.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
in this
Yeah,
area.
that'll be the buck of a lifetime in Vermont, that's
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
Come by
I won't
that
shoot
day.
another one like that.
153. Yeah.
Yeah.
How many points did he have?
14.
14.
Yeah.
How many 150s did you get that year?
I shot another 153-inch, 153 3/4 in Illinois with my bow, and then I shot a 227-pound 7-pointer in Ohio,
Wow.
and then I shot a small basket rack 9-pointer in Indiana. There was 5 that year. I'm missing one somewhere, but I can't remember exactly where
That's
that
a good
one was.
year.
Yeah,
That's a wicked
Wow.
year.
yeah. I had a smoke every year, that's for sure. Yeah.
You shot a giant out in where? Illinois? A couple years back? With a
Yeah,
bow?
back in 2015, I shot my biggest buck to date. It was 168 and 3/8, and that's still hard to beat. I haven't even gotten pictures of one like that in a while. So it's
Really?
it's
Bow hunting?
Yeah, it's all bow. That's all I do out there is mostly bow hunting.
Yeah.
They do have their shotgun seasons, but they're 3 days long, and for some reason that season just always dies down.
Really?
They just
The
never
deer
seem-
feel the pressure.
That, or I think they're in their pre-phase of the prime rut. They switch back over. They kind of calm down for a couple of days, and
Huh.
it always seemed like the second gun was always better out there.
No kidding. The late one?
Yeah.
When they're really like back on the feed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's Illinois is 1 buck, right? 1 buck
No,
state.
you can shoot 2 bucks.
You can shoot
one
too?
with a gun, one with a bow.
No kidding. The habitat must be unbelievable out there. Is
Yeah. No, it's
it?
crazy.
Thick and
Well, I mean, it's different out there.
Is it?
It's all flat. It's
Mhm.
all just fields. I mean, it's not woods like it is around here, so it's a completely different atmosphere once you get out there.
Right. More like kind of a Kansas type of vibe.
Kinda. Not so much plains, but more or
Right.
less a lot.
Ags and
Yeah, exactly.
ag
You hunt
ground.
your big draws, and that's about it. I mean,
Okay.
20-acre chunk of woods is pretty big.
Really?
Yeah.
So the bow hunting must be incredible.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
There's only so much cover, right?
But you got to be careful though going into those spots. I'm sure, like unlike
Blow
here,
'em
you can
out,
just
yeah.
walk wherever. Whereas out there, you can blow them out.
Yeah,
No,
like you said.
absolutely.
They'll bed right in the wide open hardwoods out there.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Okay.
That's all they got. I mean, it's not super thick. I mean, they got some briars, but it's really not. It's pretty much open, all open oaks, and that's it.
Now, do you think a lot of guys are just letting smaller bucks go, and that's the reason why there's so many like big ones? Because you'd think with that like small amount of woods and that many deer, it'd be easy to just wipe. Imagine if like 1,000 Vermonters
Right,
went over
right.
to Illinois, you just murder them all. But
Yeah. No, I just think they have done so well from themselves out there, and nothing really kills them off. I mean, they got coyotes, but
Right.
that's their only predator out there that can really kill them off, other than humans.
They don't have the winter out there either.
That
No.
too, yeah. I mean, they get cold temperatures, but I mean, they don't get snow. They have no snow, and then they feed on soybeans and corn all year long.
right.
Come about February, they run out of that, and they switch over to acorns.
Mm.
Plenty of feed.
Yeah,
Now, do the locals shoot small bucks, or do they? Is it kind of the culture to wait?
no, I mean, you get your dedicated hunters. They wait for good
They
ones
wait,
for
but
sure.
some people
But
don't.
you get some of the locals; they don't care. They just want to fill the
Mhm.
freezer.
Right. Yeah, because I've always kind of thought that about the Midwest, that maybe the culture was so different than, like, let's say the Northeast, where in the Midwest a lot of the guys just they want the trophy,
Mhm.
you know, and I think that kind of like it'll really change the age structure.
Yeah.
Because I mean, imagine if the entire Northeast, if guys only wanted to shoot 130s,
Right.
which is like the equivalent to a 170 in the
Mhm.
Midwest. So I mean, it would change things for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's just so much harder in the Northeast to kill a buck that's why we're more apt to kill a 80-inch 6-pointer, because it's like
Absolutely.
that's special.
Right.
You know, like it's so hard to do. But I mean, I guess it's all relative to the area. And
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it ain't uncommon to go out there to see, and when the rut's real good, to go see 10, 15 bucks in a day. So
oh my god,
you just sitting in your
Lucky
stand
all year to see that.
I
What?
know.
watching a buck go by. Oh, there's
Whoa.
another one. There's another one. There's another one. And it's like take your
Take your
pick at
pick.
sometimes.
Wow.
But I mean, unless you're really trying to trophy hunt, it's
Yeah,
it's not much to kill a small 8-pointer. That's for sure.
no kidding. I bet shed hunting's good out there too.
It's a blast. I actually went out this year and we had our best year yet. And what did we end up with? I think we had 29 sheds, and I think we ended up finding like 8 or 9 different deadheads.
Found some
Wow.
big deadheads
Yeah,
too, didn't you?
we ended up finding one real good one. I don't know what it ended up scoring. I think we ended up roughly scoring. It had a bunch of chews on it, and I think it was up like 220 something.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, it's just a monster. It had been there for
big
years.
non-typical.
Yeah, it just
Wow.
had gnarly stuff going everywhere. Had a third main beam and everything.
It's
Cool.
exciting to see what's around though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's, you just never know once you get in
Mm.
there. That's for sure.
Okay.
Now, how big of a property are you hunting out there?
Is it a lease or is it public or?
I actually have permission on a couple pieces out there.
Oh, okay.
So the pieces that I hunt on, I think the total acreage is like 250.
And that was just door knock.
Yep. Yeah, just
Nice.
going around, got lucky, and
Dang.
some nice old people at me say, "Yeah, go ahead, kill all the deer you want."
That's sweet.
Holy-
Good
Yeah.
find.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty hard to do though, that's for sure. But
Like, did you go out there in the summertime and just ride around knocking on doors? Or?
no, I mean I've been going out there for 10 years, so I know the area pretty well.
You used to guide out there, didn't you?
Yeah, I guided when I was 17, 18 years old back in 2013 and 14. I guided for a couple of years for an outfitter that was there, so I know the area very well.
No kidding. So you
Yeah.
had your foot in the door a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
No shit. That sounds like fun though.
No.
I'd like the older I get, the more I want to kind of experience some of that like crazy bow hunting, because I love to bow hunt.
Mhm.
I just the bow hunting up in a lot of the country that I hunt is just so poor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can get into good stuff in September in New Hampshire if you're right on top of them, but if you're not, it's not that great.
Yeah.
Now, you killed a beauty last year, Garrett,
Yeah.
in Vermont. Do you want to kind of run through with
Yeah,
your
it's a
bow?
giant.
Yep.
You want to kind of run through that whole story? And I'm sure the listeners, if they saw the picture of the buck, they'd recognize it because
Yeah.
it was making the rounds last
Yeah.
year.
So the story with that buck, started back in 2020, and I think I was at work that day, just getting done work, and my old man called me and said he just shot a buck with his muzzleloader. So I dropped what I was doing and I run up there, and we had snow, but it was hot and it's raining a little bit, so we're losing snow fast. And so he's got good blood, and I get up there and we're tracking it, and we keep jumping this deer, and he don't get around too good, to really dog him down and get after him. So this buck, he keeps bedded down. He sees us coming, and they had logged there 7-8 years ago probably, so it's thick, and it's nasty, tough going. So we never ended up catching up with him, and I had to work the next day. So Devin ended up going up with my old man, and they looked for him. Of course, by that point, we'd run out of snow, and so I think that was the first weekend of muzzleloader season. So me and my old man, we spent the rest of muzzleloader season in Vermont that year, just up there kind of looking for the deer, thinking that, he probably didn't make it, not knowing really what was going on. And so anyways, the 15th of December that year, we get a trail camera picture of that buck. And so that was kind of reassuring, knowing that he was alive, but not knowing he was going to make it through the winter. So I'm still kind of having a little bit of doubt going into 2021. I was turkey hunting in that area, and I found both Matt's sheds of that buck from the year that my old man had shot at him. And so
was it near where he had shot him?
It's probably a mile and a half, maybe a little bit farther. But I have no idea what that deer was doing. It was a super steep bank, and I was headed back to the truck, and no intentions of even calling turkeys anymore. I was just I was headed out of the woods.
Thinking deer.
Yeah. And the only thing I could think of where I found those sheds was he must have been bedded on top, and something jumped him down, and he was running. And I mean, I had stopped, never saw the sheds. I'm just standing there kind of looking around, trying to pick my way down, how I'm going to get through there. And I look down, and my feet are on each side of a
Come
shed.
on.
Yeah.
You were standing on them.
And so there was one shed there, and I picked it up, and I said, no doubt, this is awesome. First shed I've ever found.
Really?
And so I was like, I bet this other one's not very far. And I looked down about 10 feet, and it's poking, the G2s and 3s is poking out of the leaves. So I grabbed it, and at that point it didn't register that it was the same deer.
Yep.
So I brought it home. My old man was home, and I showed him. He's like, that's the buck I shot last year. I said, nuh-uh. And so anyways, we got some pictures of him. His rack kind of grew all funny that 2021 year. And I ended up shooting another buck in a different area with my rifle, so I couldn't muzzleloader hunt. Well, that buck was pretty regular where we were hunting up until the end of October, and then he kind of ventured off. Well, when he come back muzzleloader hunting, we were getting pictures of him almost every day, but he was broke off on one side. He only had his right side left. His left side was completely broke off, and he had like a 3-inch stub on his main beam. And so going into 2022, I told myself, I said, I need to spend a lot of time in the summer scouting, trying to find where this deer is living. So I'm on one side of the road, probably from June till August, and I was working out of town then, so I only had weekends to try to figure them out. And I'm buying cameras off Amazon for like cheap cameras. I mean, like $20, $30
throwaway cameras.
Yeah. And I'm loading every deer trail up trying to find this buck. And I'm getting pictures of him, but it's nighttime, super early in the morning or right after dark, and just not where he was living. And so it got to be the end of August, and I decided I better go elsewhere. Obviously this buck's traveling through here, but he's not living right here. Mm-hmm. So I ended up going on the other side of the road, and I was up there walking around. Got to be early afternoon, and I decided I was going to go back and get some lunch. So I'm beat-feeting out of the woods, and there's a couple little shelves, and it got to about the highest point of the land there, and they had just logged there in 2020, and so it was about 2 years old, and so it's growing up, but it's not super thick at this point. There's a little bit of berry bushes, not too bad. Well, there's one group of spruce trees, and those little tiny spruce trees are probably 12 feet tall. And I'm standing in that spot looking at that, and I said, if I was a deer, that's where I would be. And so I no sooner thought that to myself, and I saw him. He stood up out of his bed, and he walked off. He didn't know what I was, but he knew I shouldn't be there. And so I walked over there, and I found his bed, and it was indented in the ground probably 3-4 inches. I mean, you could just tell it was down to bare dirt. Everything else was leaves around it. You could tell he was using it just about every day. So I put a camera in there, And I put 3 or 4 cameras around that spot trying to figure out if he was using it a bunch, how he was getting in and out of there. And so that was like the end of August. It was like the 28th, somewhere around there, I guess. And so I went back first weekend in September and I checked that camera and I had like 6,000 pictures of him. And every single day he was in that bed.
6,000.
Yeah, it was
Unreal.
Tremendous amount of pictures. The most pictures I'd ever had on one card pull.
You like put it right on his bed.
Yeah, of an actual deer, you know, not leaves and stuff
That's
going around.
awesome.
And
Yep.
it was cool to see because the wind direction would change. He would come in and lay down, and all of a sudden he'd be there for a couple hours, and the wind direction must have changed, and he would stand up, look around, and lay a different direction. And so anyways, so I got pictures of him in that spot until the 12th of September, and that was the last picture I had of him in velvet. I got a picture of him on a different camera on the 14th with no velvet, but once he shed his velvet, he never went back to that bed. So in my mind, I'm thinking that bed's still where I need to be setting. Kind of forgot about all those other cameras. So the first weekend in October rolls around, and I had gotten sick that week prior to that bow season. I think it started on a Saturday last year, and I was sicker than a dog. It was all I could do to walk into the woods. And
stomach bug or something?
Yeah, just had a wicked fever, couldn't get enough sleep, didn't feel good.
Yep.
So I sat up there that Saturday, didn't see a deer. I sat there all day. Got down, went back home. I knew of a spot where a bunch of does were going. So I'm going to go up there and just see if I can see a deer. And it was a little less of a walk to get in there. So I went up there. I ended up getting a doe that Sunday and took care of her that night, got ready to go back to work for the week. And that next Saturday, I went back, hunted that bed, and I only sat there till about 9 o'clock. And I remembered that those other cameras were up there. So I went up there and I checked one, and I had a daylight picture of him at 8:30 in the morning on September 29th. And me and Devin, a couple of our other buddies, got a group chat on Snapchat, and I texted them guys, and they says, this is where, if I'm going to kill him, this is where it's going to be, and this is where I'm going to spend the rest of the season. So, of course, I'm still not feeling very good. And so I mosey my way back to the truck, go home, get my climber, and I go right back there. And it's all I can do just to walk in there and with my climber on. And so I get up in there and I'm sitting that night. And I heard a deer walking that night, but it was out of sight and just could faintly hear it walking around me. And so that next morning I'm sitting there and I got to be like 7:30, 7:45. And of course, I'm not feeling good that day, and I'm sitting there, kind of got my head down, and I hear a twig snap, and I look behind me, and there he is at 30 yards.
Holy
and of
smokes.
Course, behind me is the thickest part. And
did you feel better at that point?
Well, yeah. So when I saw him, I was feeling pretty good, and so I get up and I get my bow. For whatever reason, that buck, he had stopped in the one opening that I had, and it wasn't a super big hole, but I could see pretty much his whole rib cage. And I think that really, because I was excited, man. I was shaking.
Yeah.
I think that made me really concentrate on making a good shot and not so worried about how big he was. And so I shot him, and he took 2 bounds, and he kind of just stood there looking around like, what just happened? And he freaking piled up to like 40 yards.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a giant for Vermont with a bow. You said it scored 123?
123, yeah.
Oh, he's giant.
With a wicked flyer off his G2.
Yeah. Big old flyer off the G2 on the right side.
I called
wicked.
For the deer. I mean, the deer just tipped over. I'm calling my old man. Devin was hunting, and I called him. He picked up. He's all right, I'm getting down on my way. And him, another one of my buddies come up. Man, it was pretty special just having my buddies and my old man come up. And that definitely topped it.
Those are the best memories. Yeah. The recovery of a big deer.
Yeah.
Did you ever see where your old man hit him?
I didn't. So the funny thing with that buck, and I give my old man a hard time, I didn't know it at the time before I killed him, but when I killed him, his right front foot, his toe was missing on one side, and I joked with my old man. I said, I bet that's where you shot him.
Shot his toe.
No, I think he shot it in the brisket because when he had shot him, he had come flying by my father chasing a doe, and Dad just kind of picked up and shot. And I mean, normally when you shoot them in the brisket, they do bleed quite a bit. And
in the beginning,
not a bunch, but enough to make you think to get your hopes up, I guess. And that's what happened. He bled pretty good for 100, 200 yards, but then it was pretty well clotted up and not much going on. And I think that's where he shot him, but I looked for a scar on him and I could never find a scar or nothing.
But his antlers grew funny the next year.
They did, yep.
But then on the 2 years after he shot him, they went back.
Yep, they went back to normal.
But he had that big flyer. I wonder if that had something to do with it. But what did he weigh during bow season?
I shot him on October 9th. He weighed 196.
Wow.
So I brought him to Rodney Elmer's to report him.
Yep.
And of course, I don't know that much about deer, and I'm talking to Rodney, and I'm kind of bummed, that I'm obviously happy with the deer, but I'm kind of bummed he didn't quite make that 200. And Rodney was telling me, I never had heard this before, but he said on average from like mid-September till they start to rut, he said a deer will gain 7 pounds a week. And then once the rut starts, he said on average they'll lose that. He says, so you shot a 200-pound deer. He said, he's just trying to make me feel better. but that's cool. Something to think about too.
I've never heard that.
Feeding a lot for those
I've never heard that. It's interesting. They're kind of packing it on purpose for the rut. Yeah, he's a beauty.
I was tickled pink with him. I mean, you couldn't ask for better.
He'll be hard to beat with the bow in Vermont.
Yeah, especially Central Vermont. I mean, they just don't grow like that around here.
No, it's special. Now, I had thought that was a New Hampshire buck from the picture. Yeah. I just assumed.
Yeah.
You see a guy from Central Vermont with a good deer, you would just think it's New Hampshire.
Right. No, absolutely.
But yeah, what a giant.
You chased some big ones around New Hampshire last year, didn't you?
Yeah, so this is a story that might help some other people there, and I wish I had listened to myself when it happened. So I was hunting this area in New Hampshire and just running into people left and right. Couldn't get away from people, and Briggs Park where I wanted to go, and so anyways, I got home, frickin' talking to Devin about what I want to do. Of course, we go hunting everywhere he goes hunting, I go hunting, vice versa, pretty much. And so I'm looking on the map, and I find the spot that looks pretty good. Not many access places to get in there. So I told Devin, I said, that's where I'm going to go tomorrow. And if there's not any rigs there, it's probably a good sign, there's not too many people in there. There's only one good spot to access that chunk of woods. And I looked it up on Onyx. It's like 40-something thousand acres of land to the other. And then there's another road on the backside. Big piece. Yeah. So I got in there, and right off the bat, I mean, I'm probably not even half mile from the truck, picked up a decent track, and it wasn't a giant by any means. And probably a 150-pounder. But I said, this deer is going to probably take me into more deer. I'm going to figure out where they're transitioning. So I get on this deer's track, and he takes me from the bottom to the very top. And it's all, how New Hampshire's got them great big rocks, and over the years they've fallen down, and they got big holes and craters. Well, he took me through all that crap. And we get on the top, and the snow was a little bit old at that point. We didn't get good snow in New Hampshire last year. And anyways, his track was probably at least all of a day old. And so he's going along this top, and I meet another track with a big track following it, and it looked...
So a doe and a buck.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it looked smoking fresh from what the snow was. I'm no master tracker by any means. But so anyways, I take these deer's tracks, and this snow is loud. It's iced over, and there's stuff going. I'm walking out. So these deer are headed out this huge, great big point, and it drops straight off on the ends and both sides, and it's probably only 40 yards wide. I get halfway out that point, and I think I can hear a deer walking in the bottom of the ravine, but it's all thick spruces, and I can't see down there. So I was like, I'm going to beat feet out to the end of this, drop down in, and it sounded like they were headed down, so I'm going to try to cut them off. Well, I get to the end of that point, and there's one spruce tree, and I'm still on these deer's tracks. There's one spruce tree that I had to duck under, and instead of stopping and looking on the other side, I just blew right through it. And so it come to find out that buck and that doe were bedded right there within like 30 yards. And I blew them right off the end while I grunted at them. And so at this point, there's a bunch of commotion going on. I'm kind of disoriented, as everything's happened so fast. Well, I grunted at him, and I says, I bet you if I get 20 feet more down this bank, when he hits that bottom, I'm going to be able to see him. So they're still going down, and so I started walking down that bank, and a third deer took off. At this point, I don't know that buck was the one that went to the left. Yep. So I'm sitting there, and I can see that bottom pretty good, and I can't hear those deer anymore. And I didn't see him come out, and I didn't see him go up the other side. And I said, you just need to sit here, stay put. And I said, if that one on the right was the buck,
Yeah.
and then somehow they got mixed in with another deer, he's going to come back and you're going to get a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't. That lasted about 2 minutes. and I
patience level
Yeah.
0.
And I had went to check out what that third deer was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I had done that, what come to find out, that buck had left that doe
Yep.
to that grunt and was coming back up the knoll. So I went over to look at that third deer track, found out that it was a small track, not the same buck.
Yep.
And I went back, and where I was standing, I blew that buck off the knoll. He was almost right where I was standing. Yeah. And
It's a hard lesson.
yeah. And the snow was old. I mean, it was at that point, it was probably a week old snow. And they got in a barnyard of deer tracks. And it took me, by the time they got there, I kind of got back close to them, I thought. It took me a couple hours to sort them out. And I ended up, once I figured them out, man, I was like, you always hear like Larry Benoit talking about running through the woods. Well, boy, I was freaking motoring. And
trying to catch up
yeah,
to him.
it was getting late. It was like 3:30, 3:45.
Did he split from the doe at that time?
He did. He finally, he left the doe.
The big one, probably.
And so he ended up shooting straight back on top to where I originally was. Of course, I am all but running up this mountain trying to get back, and he's not giving me any sort of indication he's going to lay back down. He's not feeding unless he did in that barnyard, and I just didn't pick it up when I was trying to sort tracks out.
Yep.
Well, it got to be, I don't know, probably 20 minutes before dark, and I'm still motoring, and I jumped him off the top of that knoll just about where he was before.
Yeah.
And I give up on him at that point. Just not enough time to go track him, and I spent probably the next 4 or 5 days in there trying to figure him out, and I think he decided to find a new place to hang out.
He got sick of you real quick.
I never found his fresh track, and what I should have done that next day was I should have got right back on his old ones and figured out where he was going. But then it got hot, and it started raining, and we lost snow like 3 days after that, and I just couldn't figure out where he had went. And
Right. Yeah, no, when you were telling that story, I mean, when you're in the heat of the moment and things are coming unglued, it's so hard to be patient
for sure
when you're tracking. And I think that's something that, I mean, everybody struggles with.
5 minutes feels like half hour.
Gosh. Like, especially if you're anything, like, I'm assuming all of us, like, we don't like to sit still, right? So when you're on a buck track and you got the adrenaline going and you only can imagine what this thing's got for headgear and you're up in some wild place as it is, it's like everything's kind of, it's really tough.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes when you're getting those barnyards or when you think you're in close to one with a doe, you're better off just hanging tight and picking your head up.
Yep.
I've been successful a few times doing that but I think it comes with a lot of experiences like that.
Oh, for sure.
I think a lot of people get in barnyards and they put their head straight down and they try to figure them out, whereas sometimes they're right there.
Right.
And then you end up blowing them out. But I bet you'll be back in there this year.
Oh, yeah. I got, me and Devin got 4 or 5 cameras in there, and I'm actually on Sunday. I got to work tomorrow, but I'm going to go in there on Sunday and check them out and see what's in there. And I want to bow hunt it.
That'll be interesting. Yeah. Is it a big mountain?
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Yep.
I think from we were in there, what was it, a month ago probably?
Yeah, beginning of August, I think it was.
So every pin I had marked from buck sign that year, there was a pile of deer sign. I mean,
nice.
And so we get up back on top where I jumped that buck, and there was another big buck bed, kind of the same deal as Vermont. Yeah, so I'm kind of excited to check that camera.
So you put a camera right on the bed?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Another 6,000 pictures of some 170 inches.
Yeah. I think
no kidding.
That Vermont one, I put the camera too close. So like every time his ear flickered, it took a picture of him.
Still cool to have him.
Oh, yeah.
He was not shy of the camera, that's for sure.
So probably on this area where that Vermont buck was, I bet you I had at least a dozen, if not 14 or 15 cameras. Every single camera I had for that in this area, he was on it. He made an appearance on every camera, and he was not bashful. He'd walk right up to him, look at him, check him out, and he just did not seem to mind him.
Photogenic.
Yep.
Now, the 14 cameras you had, how big of an area would you say, like acreage? How many acres?
Probably 500-600 acres, probably.
Oh, wow.
Over the
course. No kidding. Yeah. So spread out between that 500-600 acres.
Yeah, it was probably a big block. So it's all privately owned land, but it's all public land. It's not posted or anything.
Yep.
And I do have permission to bow hunt on both sides of the road there where I trying to find him, and but it's just like a big square, and he did not seem to want to leave that square. He had a circle that he made, but that time of year he wasn't moving. I never figured out. So I was getting pictures of him in one spot, like 5 o'clock every morning, almost daylight, and then he never made it to that bed till 8:30. It was like 8:30. He would make it to that bed.
Slow.
Yeah. So I wonder if he didn't have another spot where he liked to hang out that I just never found.
And that was all one big cut.
Yep. Yeah. So they logged this one section in 2020, and then the property that borders that one, they logged that probably 7-8 years ago, where Dad originally shot him, and so that it's kind of just one big, I don't know,
Good
like,
mix of everything.
yeah.
Kind of.
So you got your real super thick stuff, and then you got all your fresh feed growing up. But where Dad had shot him with his muzzleloader, he said, "Screw this area," and he moved down. He moved down to that fresh stuff, and he didn't want to be up there anymore. Because I had put cameras up in that same area, and I never had a picture of him.
That deer that year your dad shot at him, you guys never had pictures of him, though, right?
No, not up until that point. No.
Yeah, and then he just all of a sudden made home around here and stuck around.
Yeah, it's funny, like that. We were talking earlier, that buck that I video of there chasing that doe around. Never had a picture of him. Never knew he existed. I don't know where he come from.
They'll come from. I mean, there's a study in New Hampshire. I don't know if you guys have read the story. They collared a deer in New Hampshire. He did like 94 miles straight line during the rut.
Oh, wow.
Smokes.
And then out in Missouri, they've collared them. They got bucks going 140 miles straight line.
Flat
3
ground.
states.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they'll just go.
Oh, for sure.
They'll go till they find what they want.
Yeah.
Right.
And they'll just keep going.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think sometimes when guys shoot bucks that they've never seen before, I mean, potentially they could be coming from 60 miles away.
Right.
Maybe
Which
they
is
find something
really-
better and they just said, "I'm going to live here for."
I mean,
a while.
think about it like this. Every guy that's serious nowadays has a camera.
Oh, for sure.
I'm sure you know everybody around here that's serious. Everybody, when somebody shoots a buck, everybody kind of knows. Oh yeah, I've got a picture of him, or Fred had a picture of him. When somebody doesn't know of a buck, it's kind of weird.
Right. Where did he come from?
He's coming from outside of your
Right.
who you know,
Right.
which is a pretty big area.
Mm.
It's just kind of, it makes you think sometimes.
You
Like,
get into them big woods, though. I mean, you don't get pictures of them all. They learn
That's
how to
true.
hide. They don't get big for no reason.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
for sure.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, some of them, you just never do get pictures of them. I guess it's their personality too.
Yeah.
Like some bucks don't like to work scrapes or make a lot of sign too.
Right.
You know, they just kind of
Or
slip
they
by.
see the camera once and they don't come back through.
Yeah,
there again.
I've
Seen
seen
that
that
before
too.
too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you were just saying though, you got a picture of the buck at 5:30, and then like eventually you'd get him at that bed at 8:30.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's because he was like working the thermals,
Right.
Because like, aren't the thermals like really strong, like right as the sun comes up,
Yeah.
and then they kind of it calms down
Yeah.
kind of once the sun comes. So I'm
Mhm.
wondering if between 5 and 8 or whatever, if he was like working some area where he had like the thermals like
Right.
really in his favor, and then once it was daylight, maybe he would shift to like more visual
Right.
safety
Mhm.
or whatever,
Which
I
would make sense, too, because that would be a gradual incline the way that
Yeah.
he'd make his way up there. He'd
Yeah,
get a
because
better
it was all
scent location.
uphill from where I was getting before daylight pictures of him to where I was getting him in his bed.
Mm.
And but
Yeah, it makes you think like when you to get a buck in early October, you really have to be on top of them. I
Mhm.
think.
yeah,
You know, you really have to be close to where they're bedding and where they're, because from August to let's say October, there is a shift in
for
between.
Oh, for sure.
But that when they shift, they're still not going very far.
No.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you said, you got them on every camera in
Mhm.
500 acres.
Yeah.
It makes you think that like it makes me think anyways, like all the times that I've been hunting for a buck early October and I don't get him on any camera. Well, it's probably because he's in one little section
Right.
and he's just not
Not
leaving.
moving.
Out of
Yeah.
the game.
He's just right in that little pocket. I think green rubs are so important
Yeah.
early October
Yeah, and I
and
think
in September too. Yeah.
I think the summertime scouting plays a big role in shooting, nice bucks or any bucks at all, in early October. You got to figure out where they're living, where they're transitioning.
summertime.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that I have a hard time just finding the time to go do, and
Yeah.
try to make the time. But, if you can find a nice buck in September time, late August, September, you're going to have a pretty good chance of getting
On the
shot
opener, you
yeah.
think? Yep. So when do you think, like from your guys' personal opinion, when do you think the bucks like really shift in the Northeast?
I think there's a small shift from September to October.
Yeah.
Like when we were talking, that buck shed his velvet, but he wasn't making
But only like a few hundred yards.
Yeah, he wasn't making a big adjustment. I think that last week of October, first week of November, they're really changing up their patterns and trying to find them early does.
They're just searching.
Yeah.
Once those temperatures really start dropping down, they seem to start venturing out a little bit more and expanding the area, see who's around.
Mm. Have you guys seen late, like August, like right around this time, well, like maybe a week or two ago, have you seen bucks doing swings, like kind of like going through areas that they'll be in November? I've seen that some.
Really?
Yep. Get like one picture of a big buck
Yeah, I've seen that.
in August where they'll kind of swing through an area and then they'll be gone. But then in November, you'll get
Come
them
back.
No
So,
doubt.
yeah.
It's like almost like they come around, like check it out, like see what's going on, and then they go back to their summer range,
Yeah.
and then
Do a recon.
it's funny.
See how many does are in the area.
Yeah, I've
see what's around here because those ain't gonna go anywhere. They're stay put. So
Right.
there's plenty of does. They're gonna make their way back.
That's
for
right. I
sure.
think they do it. It's
No,
almost
absolutely.
it's almost like they do like a pre-rut
Mhm.
scouting mission or something.
Yeah.
Like they're
Yeah,
like out.
Susan's still around
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah, because like most of the cameras I run them on rut sign,
Yeah.
like primary scrapes or signposts or like pinch points for like rut funnels and stuff. I've never done a whole lot of like putting cameras on beds like you're talking,
Mhm.
which is very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm always on rut sign.
Mhm.
So I feel like my cameras are like way out of the game for that
Mhm.
early season stuff.
Mhm.
If I'm going to be hunting early season bucks, I got to be like on my feet trying to find those green hook ends
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But that's very interesting. My buddy Nate, and you kind of know Nate a
Yeah.
little bit. He's a welder as well. He actually saw a big buck this summer in the whites, and kind of like jumped him up out of a bed. And he said when he went, and he said the bed was just
Mm.
like the buck used it all the time.
Yeah.
You could tell. So he put a camera on that
Yeah.
bed. So I'm excited for
Yeah.
him to see what that'll yield.
And that'll be interesting for you on New Hampshire.
Yeah,
cameras,
for
see what you
sure.
get on top of
What I
down there.
noticed with that Vermont buck too was he was the only one to use that bed. I had other bucks walk by and doze, and he was the only one to lay down.
Really?
Yep.
Really,
Mhm.
that was his bed.
Yep.
It must have been the best bed.
Yeah. They would bed
Right?
close by. I would find beds probably within 50 feet of it, but they would not lay down. Even when he wasn't there, they wouldn't. They'd smell it and they would walk right by it. They would not lay down there. I don't know.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Sitting on King's Castle.
Yeah, right. That was the best spot.
Another thing I noticed too with running that many cameras is I kind of found a pocket of does, and I'm not sure if this is how it is all over the place or maybe it was just in the area I was hunting. In the early season, I never had a buck picture where these does were hanging out. These does were living in this area, not one buck picture all of October.
And then
Come November, they
here they
cruising.
come.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the more I hunt, the more I realize like a lot of times I'm trying to hunt bucks. You know, I'm that's the way I'm thinking when I'm in the woods.
Mhm.
And like when I have time to hunt in November, I should be hunting does.
Yeah.
Because like that's where the bucks
Yeah,
are.
for sure.
It doesn't
You
matter if
know?
in their backyard they're going to be there.
Yeah, and that's more bare ground type
Mhm.
stuff I'm talking like, but obviously when there's snow on the ground, you're finding a big track and going after it. But
Yeah.
like when it's bare ground, you ought to just go. If you know of a few does that are on a ridge all the time and you always jump them, you probably should be in that
Yeah,
area
right.
because there's a
Yeah.
good chance that one of them's hot and there's some bucks from Timbuktu that come through.
Right.
Looking, you know, it's
No,
Definitely.
it's funny you say that because I was just telling that to Garret earlier. I said I was going into this area and it was some oaks up on the ridge, and I said, you know what? If I spent my first week up there, I bet I could probably kill a buck up in there. Don't know how big he'll be, but I
Yep.
bet I could at least see a couple bucks cruise through because there's constantly does in there.
yeah.
As long as the oaks produce and they hang out in there, they're just. I was
Just a
jumping them
matter of
out
time.
every time I went in there.
Yeah, it's funny. Like the serious hunters that like target bucks early season, I feel like they struggle during the rut
Oh, for sure.
because those guys are like super keyed in on like buck sign and like good bedding and stuff like that. But then during the rut, the bucks are like
Yeah.
on top of does, and like the guys wearing the orange hats and the overalls
Right.
sitting on a stump, they're cranking the big buck
Right.
because
Shooting them.
they're in the spots where all the deer are.
Mhm.
Right,
You
they're
know,
seeing doe every day.
You get hung up on the spot,
Yeah.
and you're getting all sorts of pictures in October, and you think it's going
Yeah.
to be the same in November, and it's not.
I mean, like if you are rifle hunting in the Northeast, if you're hunting big buck sign that's not super fresh, you're probably way out of the game.
Yeah. When
you're like screwed.
When me and Devin were in Massachusetts, boy, we didn't waste any time. We'd go look in an area. We'd split up, try to cover as much ground as we could, and if the deer weren't there, we weren't wasting time. You know, we were trying to get right on the deer.
Fresh sign.
Yeah, and fresh sign, and there was so much snow down there. Anywhere a buck was feeding, if they still had horns on their head, you could tell.
Yeah, you weren't there when there was bare ground; it was just all snow.
So the first week I was there from the 5th to the 10th. I think I hunted that first week.
Of shotgun, right?
Yeah, and I should have killed a buck. Same place I killed that first one. I mean, almost in the same exact spot. I was walking up through, and I frickin' come into cell phone service, and my phone went off. And so I was right at the height of the land just about, and I look at my phone, put it in my pocket, and I kind of just do a quick glance, you know, as to what's around me. Well, this buck, come to find out, was raking a tree. Never heard him. Never had a clue in the world he was there, probably only 60 yards from me, if that. And I started taking a couple of steps. He blew at me and took off, and as fast as I could pick my gun up, you know, and he was gone. So that kind of bit me in the butt there, but
you made up for it.
Yeah,
You tagged out.
Yeah.
I was his personal dragger last year. Let's just say. I mean, I was pretty good at dragging last year. That's for sure.
Awesome.
Have to return the favor this year.
Yeah. Now, last year in that deep snow when you were hunting down there, did you notice that the deer were very pocketed? Like the bucks and the does were all kind of like in one little spot.
Yeah. So, what we noticed was the does were in groups, the bucks were not. So
really, so the bucks were alone, and the does were kind of clumped up.
Yeah.
When we first got all that snow, I don't know, 2 days in a row, we tracked 2 sets of tracks. We figured there were does, but they just hightailed it right out of the country, and they just headed
straight.
And they would never even stop, not to feed or anything. They're 2-mile tracks, and they just never stopped once. Just kept going. Finally, we were like, yeah, we got to get off these ones, find something else. And finally, we get into an area, and we got into a spot where it's like, oh, these ones are actually staying here and hanging out. Let's play around in here, and that's when we got lucky with the second one there.
Were the bucks still rubbing at that time of year? Or?
I didn't notice. So that first week of December I was there, I think that was when I jumped that buck. I think it was around like the 8th or 9th. He was rubbing a tree. But after that, I did not. I didn't notice that one specific rub. I went back there a couple of days after that, and just to check stuff out and see if the deer were still moving through there. And I hadn't seen any, bark on the ground or anything like they were rubbing. The first one, he weren't so, full of feed and stuff and belly full. The second one, boy, he was chucker block full of feed. All he wanted to do was lay down.
He was trying to. He was done. Yeah. I think. So you guys have hunted it when there's acorns down there? Or have you not?
Not early season, no.
Or like December, I'm saying.
Well, the area we hunt don't have a ton of acorns.
No, a lot of beaches though.
Yeah, because I love Massachusetts when there's acorns.
Yeah,
It was loaded.
that 1 year in acorn.
Oh my gosh,
it's insane.
We
shrubs everywhere.
The last couple of days of the trip that we had went out there, we tried a different spot. Well, I tried a different spot and went on the backside. I mean, it's straight up the whole way, and I was like, why not? Let's just see what's up there. And walked all the way up to the top, didn't cut a track, and I said, the heck with this. Walked all the way to the bottom. There's a ton of acorns all over the place. They're roll your ankle on the dang things. Get back down to the bottom, 4 deer just barely walked down through. So, they're hanging out down low, but I'm sure it's a group of does, that's for sure. That was one thing that I had noticed, that we had both noticed, that late season in December, the bucks seem to hang out by themselves when you're tracking anyway. They just find one lone track, you're probably going to walk onto a buck. You find 2 sets of tracks, you might as well forget about it. It's more than likely a couple does.
Yep, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good thing to pick up on. Do you guys have any good double teaming stories, or like stories of like deer that you guys have killed together or anything like that?
The one we just barely started hunting together a lot the last 2 years, being side by side just to see if we can't kill one together. And the only time we've come close was the one that we think his second buck in Mass last year.
Really?
We were headed down out of the woods, said, it's getting late in the day. We're just going to work our way back to the truck. Hadn't cut a good track all day. And finally we get to one spot and looking at the bed, and we're like, well, it's kind of old, but it's the freshest we've seen all day. We had 2 hours a day.
Yeah, it was left. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We've been walking all day, finally cut his track and
said, what the hell, why not? Let's just take it. And we got onto him. The thing, he bedded down probably in 400 yards, bedded down like 5 or 6 times. It's like, we're getting closer and closer. We just got to keep after him and finally catching up to him. And finally the track's getting really fresh. It's like, oh, he's right here somewhere. He's not going to be too far. And finally get up to the last rise. And we're both looking at a spruce patch. He's looking at it. Don't see him. He's done this like 6 or 7 times. And he'd bed down. He's like, well, he's not here. And we take one more step, and there he goes, dashes down through. And I let one flicker at him and never touched him a bit. But that was the only experience that we've had together so
Double
far.
teaming.
Yeah.
Well, you guys you'll get some.
Yeah.
I bet. You know.
No, for sure.
Well, didn't you track a buck out in Illinois with Buck Russell a couple years ago with your bow?
In Indiana,
Indiana,
Let's hear it.
a big one.
that big 8-pointer.
I remember
Well,
seeing pictures
that-
of snow on the ground.
That
and you were-
wasn't. I wasn't tracking it
Okay.
out, but I mean, I was tracking a deer out, and I was sure it was a doe. It was the last day of bow season in Indiana, and I was just walking around. I said, "I'm going to bring out the Vermont in me out here and just start tracking them out." I said, "Why not?" And I'm looking at this thing, and she's about 80 yards away. Of course, I got my bow in my hand, and I'm like, "Nah, that's way too far to be trying to take a crack at a doe." And I get walking down through and watched it for probably about 10, 15 minutes. And I hear a limb break behind me and turned around. And there's a buck walking dead away from me. He's like, huh. Turned around, clicked him real quick. He was at 45 yards on a steady walk. And I said, might as well try it. And let one flicker and ended up catching him one. And he ended up lacing him open and ran. All of a sudden, he just went booking up through the woods. And I tracked him or ran right after him to see kind of where he'd went because we were losing snow pretty quick. And he bedded right down. I was like, what the hell just happened here? Something's funky going on. No idea it hit him. I thought the arrow sailed right over his back. And I happened to watch him for probably 15, 20 minutes and got looking around. Well, I see a blood trail that goes right to him. I was like, I must have hit him. I said, well, I'll just wait here for a minute and see if he'll stand up. At this point, I'm at 30 yards. And finally, he stands up. Get him to stand up. I said, yeah, right there, 30 yards, shot right underneath him.
Oh, my gosh.
And that was the second shot. Got it right underneath him. He went 5 yards and laid right back down. And
He was hurting.
yeah, when he stood up that second time, I could see on his rear end that he had a big blood spot. I was like, well, I did hit him, but not in the best spot. But he's hurting pretty good. And bedding down 5 yards, I knew he weren't going to make too much longer. I'm pretty sure I clipped his artery in the back there. So then I'm just doing the slow poke and finally expired him.
No kidding.
Yep.
Pretty cool way of getting them though. Out
Yeah,
there.
no, for sure.
The bow especially.
Different, that's for sure. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know about you guys, but I've always thought about like late October in Vermont, sometimes the mountains, they'll get some snow.
Yeah.
I've always thought, like,
That'd be
I
awesome.
just go up there, get up high in the mountains and just get on a big buck track. Because I know some of the bucks that I've tracked in New Hampshire, that late October, early November time, they just don't go far.
No.
Like that is like the time to track.
Yeah,
and
If
like
you're
you,
on there right there.
you hear the guys in northern Maine talk about it. They're like, come up first week. Because
Yeah.
if we get snow, that is the time to track. And boy,
As long as
I
they
mean,
know you're not on them, then you're good to go.
I
Not
mean,
spooking them.
I look back at some of the bucks. Yeah, you're totally right. I look back at some of the bucks that I've killed tracking, and I mean, a few of them I really could have killed with my bow.
Mhm.
I don't know about drawing,
Yeah.
but I was close enough to shoot them with the bow.
Yeah.
And it's like, especially on those peaks.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
You're
on those
normally pretty
peaks.
close, and you catch
Yeah,
up
I
to
mean,
'em
when
there.
you're in those spruces, you're like right there.
Pretty wild.
That
But-
would be so fun.
I
Can
think
you
the biggest thing
imagine?
with that would be more or less is if you can get them when they're not bedded down looking at you.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you got to get them
Yeah.
while they're still in their feeding.
timing.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to time it perfect. Or like get
Exactly.
them with dough right
They're
there.
sitting there. They're looking on their backtrack. They're going
Yeah.
to see you coming from a mile away.
Yeah.
Once they see you, you're done.
Yeah.
Good luck catching them again.
Yeah.
I mean,
But you ever wonder, if you jump a buck and he never really gets a good look at you, I think lots of times they get curious as to what you are.
Come back.
They
They
might
do
not
come
let you
back.
get close to them, but lots of times they'll stand there and look back
Yeah.
to try to figure out that one last time before they really get out of dodge.
Like your mask
Well, that
buck
was-
there. It sounded
yeah.
like he stood there and
Mhm.
looked at you for a
yeah,
second.
because I know he heard me coming. Man, I was making some noise
Yeah.
going through that brush, and
in one thing, like you're talking about that, a buck that I've been hunting for a few years now, I missed him in 2020. Dino.
Oh yeah.
Connor
Dino.
knows the buck well.
yeah,
One of the only bucks I've ever named. It's a funny story. I told it on another podcast, but I'll tell it again. I was coming down off the ridge and I was on the buck's track. I saw the buck get up. He ran down over the bank, kind of quartering to me,
Mhm.
which I thought was strange. I couldn't get a shot. It was quick. He was like 100 yards down over the bank for me. I was trying to figure it out. I went down. I was looking at his bed, and I was like, why did he run like quartering back to me? So strange. And my father-in-law was in the same piece of woods with me, and I got a hold of him. I was like, where are you at? He's like, oh, I just came through a little swamp. I'm kind of like rounding out the north end of this ridge. And I was like looking at my map, and I was like, oh, the swamp's right there. The buck was bedded. I was like, oh, okay. I was kind of piecing it together.
Yeah.
The buck saw my father-in-law, Justin, coming through that swamp.
No doubt.
So he was watching that swamp. I was up above him. I just got to see
A glimpse of
him
Yeah.
getting up and running away from Justin. So I was like, Justin, meet me, so-and-so. I'm kind of standing over by this bed, and we'll give this buck some time, and we'll go and we'll chase him. We'll track him, double team him. And so Justin comes up over the hill, and I'm like, yeah, that buck was just right over there on that bed. He was watching the swamp, and he ran down over the bank. I was like, I'm going to have a sandwich, and, we'll stand here for a while, and then we'll go track him. I'm sitting there. I'm like halfway through my sandwich. And I look, and the buck comes back up over the hill right to his bed. I'm like, oh, my God, there he is. I pull up. I shoot. I miss him. Muzzleloader, of course. And the buck, he's gone. But moral of the story, Justin wasn't tracking that deer. That buck was just bedded there watching that swamp, saw Justin coming through, bailed down over the bank, came back 20 minutes later. Because he liked that bed.
Right. See if he was still there or not.
He was happy with that bed.
Yeah. Right.
He won. He saw some whatever predator coming up through.
Yep.
Bailed down over the bank, felt safe, came back. So what I took away from that is, especially bare ground, if you jump a buck out of a bed, if you're patient enough, and that buck doesn't think you were like really like trailing them or pressuring them, they could come back.
Right.
And some of the guys in the Midwest, they call that the bump and dump, right? They jump them out of a bed, they set up, buck comes back, and they shoot him.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the day later,
Right.
but they like that bed for a reason. So, that's just some food for thought.
That buck, me and you tracked there that day that you shot at, the first bed we picked him up at, where we started tracking him, me and Devin jumped him. That buck beat feeded, made a huge circle, went right back to that same bed. We followed him all the way to that same spot, had our trackers on Onyx. And I says, it's almost dark. It is hard to see, but it's still shooting time. And I said that to Devin. I said, there's a deer standing right there. And he said, what? And I said, I'm pretty sure there's a deer standing right there.
I just plugged my ear.
And of course, my scope on my muzzleloader is a 2-7. And so I'm zooming in, trying to see. And of course, there's a little bit of snow in there and watery. And
the hemlocks.
Yeah. And just couldn't see it very good. And I was like, with my naked eye, I could swear I can see a deer's hind end standing there. So I let my gun down, and I take a couple steps, and poof, there he goes. But he had went right back to that first bed.
Oh, shit.
Do you guys rabbit hunt much? You ever rabbit hunted?
I did when I was younger, but I haven't for a few years.
Okay, well, the older I get, the more I realize deer are a lot like rabbits.
Would circle. And
They come right back around eventually.
So that's what we had
especially on mountains.
Yeah, we talked about that for this year when we go hunting together. If we do the same thing, one of us is going to split off and go back to that. Especially if you're in kind of the open hardwoods and you can see for 100 yards, you might catch that buck cruising back through. Especially if in Massachusetts, you're not you normally super far. You're within a mile or two of them.
And the woods are pretty open down there too. You could definitely see something.
Yeah, for sure.
I was talking with a guy last year, and he had said that they've had pretty good luck with that. If they jump a buck at the base of the hill, if they see him going back up, send one guy up after him. If you get his bed at the bottom, send one guy after him. He said 9 times out of 10, he's going to come back in that area somewhere. Somebody's going to get a shot at him, whether it be the guy going after him or the guy pushing him back down.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen it a few times. I know, Gilly, if you're listening, you know about that one we tracked all day. We tracked one all freaking day. And at the end of the day, almost dark, he took us right back to where the first bed we jumped him out of.
Patience is a key factor. In
it is.
Yeah. Sometimes you just don't have it.
No.
But
it's hard to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. When you're so excited to see what he actually had, but if you only had the patience to wait there for a couple hours, you have just as good luck. Then you can also see what else is cruising through at the same time.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
What's your guys' plan for the fall?
Oh, where we're hunting?
Yeah, you guys, you stuck to New England last year, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to Illinois and Indiana. I'm not going to do that trip this year. kind of got hooked on the tracking.
Yeah, you did
Uh,
good.
Yeah,
Fun.
I've yet to kill a buck in New Hampshire or Maine. And I was telling you guys earlier, I set up my truck so I can sleep in the back, and I've got a cap and stuff for it. So
And it's a Tacoma.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a Tacoma.
So
yeah.
you're already kind of aligning yourself
for
with,
sure.
with the buck tracking gods.
New Hampshire is close enough to home. I'll probably drive back and forth. It's not quite 2 hours, probably an hour and 40 minutes to where me and Devin been hunting. But we want to go up to Maine. So I think if we go up there for a week, we'll stay in the truck and every couple of days go into town and take a shower and stuff. And
Just be mobile, bounce around,
Yeah.
follow the snow.
but definitely hooked on the tracking. So I'm going to try to chase some snow around and just
It's fun,
yeah,
man.
for sure.
You
Yeah.
had some good experiences last year by the sounds.
Yeah, and I really after that 200-pound mark. So I think
Oh,
the best
yeah.
chance is I think personally never spent too much time in Maine, but I think the best chance of that
Mm-hmm.
shooting a 200-pounders in New Hampshire. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But from what I've seen, I think that's my best chance of getting one.
Yeah.
is New Hampshire.
Especially that muzzleloader season. I think you're right.
Right.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
definitely think we got to hit up the Ohio late muzzleloader season.
Oh,
that was a lot
for
of
sure
fun
in
too.
January,
Everything started shutting down. It's like, let's hit another state out.
Yeah.
You did that last year?
Yeah, we
No
went
kidding.
during that January season just for that 4-day muzzleloader season. Let's just try it, and man, we had a ball out there.
You see some deer?
A lot of
Oh, a
deer. And we
pile
got
of
into
deer.
a wicked good area. It's like if we bow hunted out here, we could probably kill a buck.
You
out here.
found a beauty freaking shed out here too.
Yeah, it was a fresh shed,
Oh,
a
shit.
4-point side, and got into an area that I bet if I were to guess, there was 100 deer in that area. I mean,
Wow.
there was just a ton of deer, and there was a hook in every 5 feet. It seemed like they were just
Wow.
everywhere. And he had found a shed the day before. It was an old one, and all of a sudden I said, "Man, I bet I'll find a shed in here if I look hard enough." Sure enough, I can 20 feet out in front of me. There's one laying there on the ground.
Wow.
Big one. Huh?
Yeah, it was a real good one.
And the pressure in that January season didn't seem like there was as many hunters. Most
Right.
of the rigs you saw were Vermonters.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
The old Green Army.
Yeah. And but I've been out there before for the first gun, and boy, it
Yep.
gets hammered.
Really?
But that second gun seems to be.
I was planning on going out the first, but maybe I'll switch it to the second after hearing that.
I've heard of guys having good luck in the first one, but I definitely think there's a lot of pressure, which
Yeah.
could be good. If you're not in a huge area, they're moving some deer, but it all depends on where you're
Right.
at and.
Biggest thing in Ohio is you start shooting those bucks that are shed, and you
Yeah.
start killing those big bucks that are
Yeah, with no
don't
horns,
have no
yeah.
horns on them left.
That sucks.
And it's like,
awful.
didn't want to do that.
No, not at all.
They did away with that for a while. I thought they'd
State land, yeah.
and then I think they brought it back.
What did
Did
they
they?
shorten the season up?
Well, so they did away with shooting does in January. It
Oh.
was bucks only,
Right.
and then I think they brought that back. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that.
No, I have a good Ohio January story. I used to go down. My buddy Mike and his dad Ben. I used to go down with them. There was this farm that would do weekly leases.
Mhm.
It was like 700 acres.
Yeah.
Big, huge block of timber, and they would do weekly leases from the first day of bow right to that January season. So tons of pressure, but there was a bunch of big pieces around it that only a couple guys hunted. So it was pretty good. And I was younger, and I didn't really know a whole lot about like baiting deer, but I guess down there, guys bait the heck out of deer,
Yeah.
especially January.
Yeah.
And this one year, it was wicked cold down there that January season, and no feed. All the acorns were kind of gone. There wasn't many to begin with, and it was like 10 below zero. And I remember this one time I was way back. We called it the back 40, this way back piece in this farm that we could hunt. And I was back there, and it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was getting hungry, so I pulled out a bag of beef jerky, opened that bag of beef jerky, and I'm sitting there eating it. 10 minutes later, 20 doe come running in. I'm
Hear
like,
the back.
holy crap! Well, I didn't like put two and two
Register,
together.
yeah.
I didn't register. It's like, holy crap! Covered up with deer. Put the beef jerky bag behind me, behind the tree, and I'm kind of like waiting. No bucks, nothing. I'm like, okay. But my buddy Ben, he had a corn pile by the camp, and he had put a game camera on it, and it was not far from camp. And we checked that camera the last day we were there, and there was big bucks on it all the time on
that's
that corn
crazy.
pile. But after, down the road, a few years down the road, I kind of, put it together that all those deer, that 20 deer that came into my it was to me opening that plastic bag.
Yeah. No,
If I would have known any better, I'd be opening plastic bags everywhere. That's better than a grunt call out there in January.
right.
Holy crap.
Get the bag out there.
Dude, I
shake
had
it
no
around.
idea. I was out there in the back 40 thinking I was hunting a friggin' rub line in January. You know, I was probably 16, 15.
No, that was like this February. I ended up going down. I had a terrible year last year. I couldn't kill nothing, it seemed like. And one last hoorah and get into February. And me and the old lady went down to Jersey, and you can bait deer down there. And we put out a bunch of feed and finally found a spot where it seemed to be pretty decent and get down there. And the last day of the hunt, or second to last day, we get down through and baited up a new spot, and a buck ended up coming through the next morning, and that's actually the deer I ended up proposing my fiance to.
No kidding.
Yeah, ended up working out pretty good. I was supposed to do it in November, but it never worked out.
So you shot the deer
Yeah.
and you proposed when you were walking up on it? Or?
So I shot it. She was in a different area. Could see it laying there dead about 40 yards from the stand, and I went and propped it all up and told her to help me come
It was a
find
buck?
it. Yeah, it was
Nice.
It was a 3-point side, never grew the other side.
Oh,
There
okay.
was no pedicle or anything.
Well, inbred
Yeah.
New Jersey buck.
I said, yeah, perfect. This will do.
Perfect.
I said, it's
Yep.
not on a nice buck out in Illinois, but this will
Hey.
have to do the
Yeah.
trick.
It's a thought that counts,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And she said yes.
Yeah,
hang around?
Yeah,
absolutely.
congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, ring was on and everything.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good thing she didn't grab a hold of the horn
I
and
know,
start
right?
playing on
Ripping
there.
around.
Yeah.
The way that it was positioned, if she would have held it just right, it would come right off. So
Boy.
luckily she see it when she walked up to
That
it.
is a redneck proposal
Yeah,
if
no
I've
kidding,
ever heard it, huh? Wow.
Uh,
You guys went
That
all over
is
the place
great.
last year, then, huh?
yeah, I think I hunted 9 states last year.
Holy
Wow.
Yeah.
One thing I want to touch on real quick is you guys are both younger guys and you both
Mm.
own your own businesses. That is super important. You know, I think
To
that
do what you like.
to
you
do
gotta-
what you
yeah.
like, you got to be able to have the time to do it.
Yeah,
sure.
no, time management is definitely key for sure.
It's tough, like we were touching base on the early season scouting. It's hard. Devin works 6-7 days a week. I come work out of town all week long, come back home, and the local guys want me to do work. So it's really hard to find the time to figure out them early bucks. But boy, come November, all that hard work pays off,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
got 6-7 weeks to just nonstop and go deer hunting.
Yeah.
Man, it's
Right.
awesome.
It sucks at the time, but it pays off. in the
Yeah,
end.
for sure.
Absolutely.
It's hard to get, it's hard to locate them, but
Do your quick homework.
yeah,
and
once
it
the
works
snow
out.
comes, if you got time to just constantly dog them big bucks, especially in New Hampshire and Maine and stuff, I think it'll work
Yeah.
out.
The
And with
time
your
is
experience,
key.
you guys know what to look for
Yeah.
when you're out there looking. So
Mhm.
I'd
Yeah.
rather work 7 days a week all summer and have
Oh,
the
for
fall
sure.
off
No,
than,
Yeah.
absolutely.
than have the summers to scout all
Yeah.
week. Yeah, yeah.
7 months out of the year working 7 days a week really ain't too bad.
No,
Not
yeah.
when you have November.
Right,
No.
exactly.
Right.
Man, yeah.
And we've
That's
been
key.
up to Maine a couple times in New Hampshire. I think we're in pretty good shape going into deer hunting. I think we'll be onto the deer. If not, it's always good to scout some new areas too.
Well,
you
I'd
did
say
pretty
so.
well last year.
Yeah.
New areas. So
Right.
you could do it again this
Yeah.
year.
Well, I heard one of your guys' podcasts. You were talking about getting a woodsman and shooting the biggest buck of your life.
Yeah.
Well, I just bought a woodsman.
Oh, there you go.
I'm hoping,
Hey,
yeah.
you're due. Hey,
Yeah.
man, you're due. Yeah.
Devin just bought one too, so hopefully we can
Nice.
double up.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you guys shooting for powder?
So I got a 50 caliber and
Yeah.
I shoot 110 grains.
Okay.
And he bought a 45 caliber.
Well, you guys got
Yep.
2 of them, didn't you? Or you did?
I only got one.
Okay.
He ordered 2.
Gotcha.
So I bought one and then ordered another one. Well, the order never ended up coming through, so I only ended up with the one. But I ended
Gotcha.
up getting the 45.
Yep. Nice.
Yep. That's what I have. I have you have a 45 too, don't
45
you?
too,
Yeah.
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 I shoot 120 pounds of blackhorn
Yep.
with a 225 grain saboted bullet.
Yep.
Yep. Nice.
It's lethal.
Mhm.
They do.
So
It
I,
really cranks them hard.
I had a hard time getting. So I ordered some bullets from Woodsman, and I should email them about it. But they haven't shown up yet. And I
Yep.
was getting kind of worried. So I had a CVA Optima, and boy, nothing wrong with that gun. It shoots awesome. So I was shooting 270 grains out of that power belt.
Yep.
And boy, that Woodsman loves that. And
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
it
no
shoots
kidding.
that freaking good.
Nice.
Good.
And so I think I'm gonna stick to that. And
Yep.
a couple of deer I got last year, boy, there was a lot of brush in the way, and it blew through them like nothing.
Cool.
Yeah. So
Well, if you got a recipe, stick
Yeah.
to it.
yeah,
Right,
for
no,
sure.
absolutely.
If it ain't broke,
Don't
Don't fix it.
Right. No, exactly.
I'm hoping them Woodsman bullets show up here pretty quick. I'm
Have you
sure
guys
they
ever
will.
tried shooting the pellets with them or Just powder.
Blackhorn.
Yeah.
When
That's what everybody says. It just
I
powder.
switched to Blackhorn before I got to Woodman, and there was a big difference when I switched to Blackhorn with my bone collector. I had a bone collector I shot a few bucks with, and it was such a night and day difference. I mean, with the Pirate X powder or the blocks or whatever those things were, pellets.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't bleed.
Yeah.
They wouldn't bleed worth a damn, and it just seemed like no penetration, and
it's not getting the velocity.
It wasn't getting the velocity, but once I switched to the Blackhorn, it was a whole nother ball game.
Yeah, boy, the juice Blackhorn out of it rocks you pretty
Oh,
good.
it does, especially the old 45 with no scope.
Yeah.
You know you're shooting it.
Yeah.
You know you're shooting it. But
now, this is something I wanted to ask you guys. So I've been back and forth on putting a peep on that Woodsman. Just I like the idea of the peep hunting in bad weather.
Carries so nice too.
Yeah. Do you think the peep would gain you more deer in bad weather or cost you more deer? Because like one of those Massachusetts bucks, I couldn't see his horns, and I bet without a scope I wouldn't have been able to see. So I've been constantly taking the scope off, putting the peep back on, taking the peep off, putting the scope back on.
I think it's area dependent. It seems like
it is, and I would tell you, go with what you're confident in, because for me confidence is everything. You know, if I was more confident with a slingshot, I'd bring the slingshot.
Right.
You know, it's just. It's whatever you feel like you're more dangerous with.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've killed a deer with the Woodman at probably 120 to 140 yard range. I was a buck that my buddy Gilly he had shot first, and then I had finished him way up across his cut, and just didn't even really think, just pulled up, put the bead on the shoulder, squeeze it off, and I got him.
Yep.
But I mean, I had ordered this year. I'd ordered a small pair of binoculars, and I think I'm actually going to start running those when I carry my peeps. Yeah, right on my chest. A guy that for Northwoods Whitetails, John Wright. I had edited his hunt last year of a New Hampshire buck, and in that video you can see he's got a little pair of binoculars, and he's always looking at the buck, and stuff. And I think that's key.
Oh, for sure.
If you're going to run the peep in an area where you think there is a chance to catch a deer at 120 or 50 yards, I think that is a big deal. But if you're confident shooting the peep, I think it is definitely better.
Yeah.
I think it's faster.
It's way faster. It's way lighter.
Yeah.
The way less chance of you not being able to shoot a deer because of, scope fog, snow in the scope, whatever. But I mean,
it doesn't take much snow or rain to ruin your visual.
And then once it's in there all day, it seems. Like, no matter how much you wipe it, you had stuff inside your caps,
for sure.
and you're flipping them down, they're fogging up.
Yeah, and the paper towel you bring with you soaked by, 10 o'clock. And
so what I did is, I have a rifle with a scope, I have a rifle with a peep, and I have a muzzleloader with just a peep now. And I only muzzleload hunt with the peep. But I got a Ruger 1022. I've always had one. And you can get a Williams peep sight for the 1022.
Yep.
And when I'm going to just shoot for fun, I shoot that Ruger 1022 with a peep. And I think that really helps build confidence.
Oh, for sure.
And,
we were talking about that, rolling a tire down the bank. So just getting used to it.
Yeah. And I think if you grew up rabbit hunting, squirrel hunting with open sights like I did, a peep's second nature. If you can shoot, you can shoot. And, I think it is tracking. I think you can't go wrong with it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you get a quick shot off, and I think it's way less thinking involved when it's a peep.
Yeah.
Because when you go into a scope, it's like you're going into a whole nother world.
Oh, for sure.
But
I'm always worried about catching them in like the open hardwoods, but it just seems like you never catch them in the open hardwoods. It's always in the thick.
Not a lot. But at the end of the day, I think it boils down to what are you confident with? Right. If you're more confident with the scope, you better bring the scope.
Right.
If you're confident in the peep, you're going to do good with the peep. But
tracking, like from a lot of videos and the few experiences I had, seems like a lot of times them bucks you jump when you're tracking, you're within 100 yards of them.
Oh, yeah.
So if you can shoot a peep good at 100 yards or less, I think that's probably the way to go, and that's probably the way I'll end up going. But I just been so back and forth on it,
Right, and I think you got to take the leap of faith, because another thing too you have to think about is you're not going to get everyone, no matter what you're carrying.
Right.
So you got to kind of take the pros and cons of each one, and you're not going to get them all anyway.
Right.
So, what one's going to benefit you most at the end of the day?
Right.
Boys, this was good.
Yeah,
This was a
for
great
sure.
podcast.
Yeah.
Gets you excited.
Oh my
Almost
gosh.
there.
I won't sleep tonight.
A couple more weeks.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I'm gonna try for a bear this weekend. I'm
Oh,
gonna
that'd be
out in the woods.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm gonna try. I was talking to Connor about it. I really want to get a bear in the freezer,
Mhm.
turn it all into burger.
Yeah.
My wife and I eat a ton of burgers, so like tacos, lasagna, whatever, pasta. I think it would just be good to put a bear in the freezer, take a little pressure off the deer season,
Yeah.
maybe shoot a doe or two, and then go tracking.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
Because like a lot of years, it seems like I start tracking and I don't have anything in the freezer,
Mhm.
and you don't really hunt good,
Right. Right.
when you're worried about meat.
Yeah.
But yeah, guys, thank you.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
thank
no,
you.
appreciate it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well,
Had a
good luck
blast.
this year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you
too.
as
We'll
well.
get you on again.
Hopefully,
This
we'll
was good.
have some more stories this fall.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what you
Absolutely.
guys put together this year.
Yeah.
All right, boys. We'll see you on the next one.